Can you show the mural to the squishies?
Oh, yeah. I actually have to switch my screen. I forgot about that. That's important. Okay. This is Mama's beautiful mural recreation in her notebook because she's been going crazy.
That's how I do my thinkies.
I think it's beautiful. I think you've done an excellent job.
I think it's immaculate. It lets me do the thinkies.
All right,
let's do this.
Are you ready to lose our goddamn mind?
Go back to mine. I need to show something.
Okay, yes.
It's because of doing this that I'm able to think. So if you take a look at my picture and you see the stripy line down the center of the beast,
okay,
and then the X's on it, right? And then you see in the back the two planets above the moon and how one has that stripy line and one has the X. I think that proves that whoever came to Earth to abuse Earth is a combination of those two planets. And that is a combination of their machine killer thing that is attacking and fighting on their behalf. And I think that can be like a whole Shinto thing too, with the underground and a princess, the whole Peach, Princess Kiriagi. But I honestly think that he was trying to show, because he created the stripies that are in the middle on that one planet. You can see it in the original. And then a planet with a bunch of X's on it. 5 X's, as a matter of fact. I went back and took a look in some of the other pages. And you see both of those on that monster. It's supposed to be telling us that whatever is attacking came from above there. That's what I think.
Interesting.
Like, it kind of makes sense according to that.
Interesting.
Look.
God, this is blowing my... Guys, this mural's been driving me insane. What's up? Welcome to the Drawk Show. We're going to be theorizing about the second world from the Harley text. The second one. Is that what they call it? They call it the second world?
Hello, squishies. It's me, Mama Drawk.
So let's talk about it. What did we go over last time? And is there any revisions we want to do? Well, last time we talked about the first world weeks and weeks ago, that humanity were enslaved, possibly to themselves, possibly to others, that they accessed some great power, that they were harvesting the underworld was my theory. But we had lots of thoughts about what could be going on in the first world. It's confusing. And I want to talk about, can we start right away by talking about something that you brought to my attention, which is the Dawn and Dusk theory video, where they went over something a lot of people have been talking about, which is the idea of the One Piece world being a Dyson sphere, a world that is built to cover over a small star or sun to harvest it for energy. Because that would change the first world and change a lot of what we're looking at. How are you feeling about that?
I love a lot of his theories. I liked when he talked about the Lunarians being the people who were down on the blue planet, which he is calling the red planet, and that it would have been on fire, and that they were harvesting its insides, and that's why they changed it from a world on fire that the Lunarians lived on. I especially love it because then it makes that image that we created, that we decided would be Lunarians at the top of the tree there. It would make it like they were trying to protect the tree from everyone else. And it would also make sense then, because it would, if the Lunarians were the ones coming down, it would make less sense for me that they would have been on the moon coming down, and more sense to me that they are called behind the moon on those 2 other planets. And it would make more sense to me that that monster would be a combination of those 2 planets who came down. But I think then that there would have had to been a stop off at the moon where they got together, because there's a whole underground society that was there, remember? And so I think like it took them time to make their way down. But you know what I was thinking is, he said something really interesting in there about how these planets in particular, and there's a few more, plus the little blue planet that used to be on fire in his perspective, would have been in a different solar system before, and that they would have broken off. And it started to make me think, because I looked at the picture that is in there of O'Hara, where they show this planet as being at the center and then the ones around it. Started to make me wonder, why can everyone breathe the atmosphere and everywhere out in space? And it started to make me wonder if there is more going on with a secret from the Void Century that actually turned these into its own little miniature solar system, and that maybe this was supposed to be the sun for all of the rest of the planets.
Or maybe this is such a massive object that like things in low orbit are still within atmosphere.
Yes, and that they intentionally made it so there's some sort of protective outer, am I saying bubble? I don't know, that has encapsulated all of these moons and planets together and created their own atmosphere for all of them to move and live within. And that outside of this, because we've never seen outside of this, you couldn't travel, you couldn't move, you couldn't breathe. And that this is actually, all of them are working together as a unit and we're supposed to be together.
God, this is so the SBS, have you read the new SBS?
You know that my thing is that I read everything on Sunday.
All right, then here's what's up. I'm going to send you a compilation. Read through this because I think this is relevant. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it just called Blue Planet?
Yes, and he thinks it was red before, and it is just called Blue Planet or the Blue Star.
Okay, it's
But
called
yeah.
Blue Star or Blue Planet. Well, the thing is, planet and star have the same word in Japanese. It just means celestial body.
Are you sending me a thing?
I sent you a thing.
Oh, I love it.
Oh my God. It's been referred to Blue Star / planet before by Enneru in the cover story, correct? Which is what has me believe that maybe it wasn't a red planet, but I'm thinking about something now, right? This is us going back. We'll go forwards into Second World in a second, but we kind of need to adjust our expectations. A reason I'm thinking maybe it wasn't the red planet is, hear me out. What if the reason it was called Blue Planet was because there was also a red planet and red planet became the Grand Line? Because if you look at that, like you said, if you look at that thing in the sky, right? The thing in the sky. So what if they pulled that planet onto the blue planet to make the red line?
Maybe. Yes, maybe.
Maybe it was the god of Earth, was that planet.
I have to go back. I can't read this thing you sent me. It's just a dumb thing about kid.
Well, this is the SBS. You can click the forward button to look at the other SBS answers.
That's going to take me forever.
The biggest thing is naming the One Piece world as the Blue Planet / Blue Star is an official name now for the One Piece world. And then the other thing that's relevant is backstory of Hanafuda, the warlord that Ace defeated.
Yeah, I already know that because it was in Dawn to Dusk too. He said the same thing, Blue Planet. But he said that he thought that it was originally a red planet that had a bluishness, that he thinks that the red line came about from burning of the iron and oxygenating. I don't necessarily agree with that
See,
one.
I think a lot of that's possible in concept. The big reason I don't like that, and I don't like a lot of the discussions about nuclear fusion and nuclear energy being something we're going to specifically touch on in name, is because I don't think about the way that we talk about DNA. We don't talk about, oh, there's these 2 chemical bonds on either, or 4 different chemicals that bond on opposite sides of a helix, and that's what determines it. We talk about lineage factor as this very ambiguous, like, this is what guides progress and evolution. This is what guides how you are. It's just the One Piece word for genetics. So I can't see us having any answer that feels like it's going to require talking about specific chemistry and progresses to explain. Anything like that, I think, is kind of off the table. However, a conceptual nod to is very possible, which is why I'm not ruling out that this planet used to be the sun. For my money, I don't think this planet used to be the sun.
A mini sun, apparently.
Yes. For my money, I don't think this planet used to be the sun, but I could see something kind of similar. And I'm not sure what.
I have the same feeling. I think it would be more like this planet could have been hot. This planet could have been something that was on fire. It does make sense that they keep mentioning that the Lunarians are capable of living within any atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
It is at the center, which is weird. Oh, and then Frostfire plus heliocentric. It is at the center, which makes sense that it would warm the other planets. But on the other hand, I don't know if it... And the Lunarians are on fire, so living in fire does make some sense. But also, I was thinking about how he gives such obvious clues in such weird ways that won't feel like clues until later on.
Yes.
And then you're like, thanks, buddy. And one of those clues that I was thinking about is that we went to an island that was half fire, half ice. And I was thinking about when we were at there that it was inhospitable to anyone, but you could have still had homes. You would have had strange structured homes in the fireside that were, I don't know, rock and blah, blah, blah. But I don't see the Lunarians as being able to have like a deep, rich culture with all sorts of like innovations, et cetera, if the whole planet was on fire.
Yeah.
They ended up having to
I don't see humans as having been able to be there to begin with if the whole planet was on fire. Like,
His theory is that because it was the Lunarians, and the Lunarians actually are made of part fire, and they can live in any atmosphere, that's what he's speaking of.
Yes.
But it doesn't feel like that's the kind of society that you wouldn't be able to create this great society if it was all on fire.
I also don't think it puts us in a difficult position, right? Where if we look at this, it really doesn't feel like, looking at the mural, that the Lunarians could have been on Earth in the first world. And if the world was fully on fire, if it was fully a sun, it doesn't feel like all this could have been happening. Now, you could say, people have said that maybe this all wasn't on Earth, the blue planet, that all this was up here, and that's what we're seeing. But that doesn't feel right to me, because then it doesn't feel like it checks out to have this long history in this world that was established if it was a sun, if it was just a ball of fire beforehand. And that's what I'm kind of lost on. Now, could it have happened if the era before was a world that was like, how do I put this? Was a sun that had been Dyson sphered, that they'd use some magic or technology to encase the sun and harvest its essence? Well, here's what I've said. If we are in the world where we are suggesting that it was a sun, I want to tell you how I would, with the way One Piece works, justify that. We see in the sky, one of the planets has a band the same as this, the same as the band on the red. So my thinking is that if this used to be a sun that these other planets, like what is now the moon, orbited, I think that they used their command over the gods to encase parts of it in rock. Then they drilled into it with the treasure tree Adam and the sun tree Eve, which had the job of extracting the sun's energy. And humans were made in the garden to serve the gods until they rebelled. It's a nice Garden of Eden paralog or analog. It runs parallel with tons of different myths. It puts them in a position to be a creator. It gives them a reason to come down as these modified beings, the Lunarians, to have the durability to survive the planet outside of these little islands they've made for themselves. But it just doesn't quite fully click to me. It doesn't feel right to me. How do you feel about that? Because that feels like close to how I'd imagine it would be if this world was a sun, but it doesn't feel right.
I don't think he's right on that the whole world was on fire. I can get behind the idea that the Lunarians were already on the Earth. I really can. Because when you see that center figure, and we thought of that as being a Lunarian where you put it, it makes sense then that the Lunarians would be protecting kind of like the mother tree. I don't think it's all on fire at all. I need to be a weirdo and kind of like skip forward in the theory to say a thing. So number one, we see people building great vessels of destruction here. One of them is obviously the Ark. We think these are the three vehicles of destruction that they're pouring the essence in, the greedy essence in. That's the one that makes me wonder, are they trying to bring that back to the sky? Because remember that Enel says that the gods live amongst the sky. So his theory makes less sense if you're thinking about it as the gods live amongst the sky and the gods came to Earth. So then I would say the gods could be the people who now call themselves the gods, the dragons. And their two combined nations could have come, and that's why this dragon thing is covered in that line and the 5 X's that are on that other planet. I'd say that makes sense.
I want to talk about a framing that I think you'll like, because I think people get far too often into One Piece needing to have, well, who are the gods? And I think we can't see it that way, because throughout all of One Piece, everything that's been a god has been a god because it's called a god. And even if we're getting into literal gods, it's not like they have divine powers. They have powers similar to everything else. Luffy has a literal god fruit. Okay, but does he bend reality more than Law's fruit? That is not said to be a literal god. Sengoku has a literal god fruit. He literally just gets big and makes shockwaves. The celestial dragons are called gods because they rule the world. My take is that gods and demons are basically the same thing. That demons are going to be magic. They are where magic comes from. And gods are when a demon is supposed to be respected and appreciated. Now, we're talking about the second world today. So I want to talk about how I see this having happened. Grand Line Review did an awesome video where he talked about the fact that we've seen there be multiple conversations about the ages of One Piece. So I'm going to go off for a second here. And the ages are the age of the Sea Circle and the age of the gods. The age of the Sea Circle runs like, I think we're in the year 1600 or something, which tells us that the Grand Line and Red Line have existed for over the 800 years since the Void Century. Why is this important? Because it means, it means this came down, this big bastard came down like 800 years before the Void Century, when our celestial dragons rose up and took over. Then they deleted 100 years of history. Before that, was the age of the gods. My take is that before this era, before the first age was snuffed out by the sea circle, the grand line and red line being formed to separate the world and divide people, I believe there were creatures called demons, creatures of myth and energy coming from the underworld. They were the fire within the earth, sprouting up and out. That was the sun within the earth. The forbidden sun was the underworld, the world of dreams and myth. And they were everywhere. And humans were learning to harvest that, like we talked about before with the mother flame. I believe that was said to be no, because humanity was trying to reach the level of gods. I think that's works as a Tower of Babel and ancient Greece and a ton of other mythologies reference. There's tons of mythologies that talk about humanity harnessing powers that are not meant to them to the point that God or gods need to snuff them out. That's kind of my take. Now, after that ended, I believe that's the sort of the second world, is the age of the sea circle beginning. The second world, we talked about the fact that we believed the forest god taming demons being the creation of devil fruits. I think it goes further than that. Like I've said before, I believe the Lunarians are the forest god. I believe they put themselves in the height of the world because they were like, humanity can't self-govern. We left the world to them to have free will, and they abused this beautiful power of dreams to start wars with each other, to fight each other, to take over, to try to reach greater powers than they were allowed. We can't leave it to them anymore. We're taking over. The Lunarians are the forest god, and they either plant the second tree, the sun tree, or it was already there and they protect it. They protect the sun tree from the red line's creation. We've both talked about the fact that the ancient weapons are allegories to these big, giant, dark figures here, the godly figures. You've talked about the fact that you think Uranus is shunting things into another dimension, so it could reasonably blip out the sun tree to protect it briefly by letting it live in the underworld briefly. Either way, it is my belief that it feeds off the underworld and was a font connecting it to the underworld and where all these creatures of myth were, and that the Lunarians did a few things. They managed to have warriors who they could control with demonic powers by infusing someone's body with a devil, by growing fruit from the tree containing devils. Let's put a bookmark there, spin it back to you, and then after, let's talk about our theory about M.A.D.S, because I think we need to talk about that before we can continue this.
Yeah, so it's so all over the place, and the reason it's so all over the place is because we have so many theories now
so fucking
roaming,
much.
and some of them cross-purpose each other, and yet we
Yes.
believe them.
Yes.
So, like, for instance, I started to think, once I realized that he made the same pattern on Loki as he made on the planet and on the dragon, right?
Mhm.
If you look at the original Loki in the mural that he did, that same pattern is in 3 places, and those are the 3 places.
Yeah.
He didn't put the X's on Loki, so Loki feels like he comes from one of the places. So I started to think I'm now fully obsessed with the idea of those 2 planets coming down to Earth, for which whatever people they were. I think there is a stopping off point though, because the inside of the moon is for sure got all of those ruins. Okay, but I can see the Lunarians having been here only because, do you know how many times we talk about why is it that so many different creatures have wings and they have different types of wings and da-da-da-da-da. So
Well,
I see the Lunarians as being a whole part of anyone with wings. Anyone who doesn't have the Lunarian style wings is like a thinning out of Lunarian blood, and I don't mean that in a blood quantifying way.
But I want to, the reason I go the other direction, and I'm not saying you're for sure wrong, is because it seems like the races of the Shandians, the Birkins, and the Skypeans existed on the moon, but the Lunarians didn't. So that's why I feel like the Lunarians didn't exist as a group until they came down.
I feel they are like cousins, if that's the right word that I'm looking for. They are more closely related than the other people.
I agree. I can't talk about what I think they are until we go into M.A.D.S. Do we want to talk about that? Was it you who first? I think we both kind of came up to it bit by bit, but because I came up with the furthering, but you brought up that you thought Caesar Clown was giving us hints.
When I started to look at his theory and say, like, okay, if the entire thing was on fire, and I was like, it doesn't really make sense that the whole Earth would be on fire.
Oh, by his, she means dawn to dusk.
It doesn't make sense that the whole world would be on fire to me yet. Like, I enjoyed a bunch of the theory, but that's not where I'm at. When I look at it, though, and I see Caesar Clown on the area and taking back over the area that was on fire that used to just be a place of, well, experimentation for the government.
Yes.
And that he went into that place and took it over. I started to think, well, Oda loves to put things right out into the open in our face, right? So I was like, what is he telling us with Caesar Clown? Caesar Clown comes in after people screw up their environment and he starts to make mad experimentation, but he doesn't have the same capability as Vegapunk does. So his experiments are incomplete and rough, and it's like he's gone back in time in his experimentation in comparison to Vegapunk. And he's having to remake, remodel, and redesign experiments that if he had worked with Vegapunk and that information hadn't have been lost, then he would have been able to make, together they could have made Bounds Forward. But instead, he's having to basically redesign it and coming up with this idea like the smile fruit and other things like this. And then I thought, my God, it's like Oda is putting a hint right there in the open that we are living in an age that is cut off from the technological information of the past. And even Vegapunk is having to make things up that didn't exist before and is therefore also screwing them up, whether you like it or not. Think about his weird ass little children that he's made and the way that he's used Kuma and all these other things that are honestly not always awesome or helpful to the world. And I was like, so it is like a story within a story that he is trying to tell us. Caesar Clown is a miniature version of what's taking place in the larger version. So then I was like, okay, then what is he trying to tell us about the world? Why did Caesar Clown go to a place that had been through battle and had been environmentally destroyed and was either too cold or too hot? It also mirrors our own world. And I was like, it feels like he is trying to make a world within a world reference so that we, if we paid attention, we can use Caesar Clown as a larger showing of what's taking place in One Piece.
But then on hearing that, I sat with it for a little bit and then called Mama back the next day. And hear me out on something. One Piece is making it clear that each of these worlds has happened in cycles, right? Vegapunk has told us that he's not a man of the future. He's a man of the past, recreating technologies that already existed. We are being told that the acts of great science from him and his compatriots are actual just mirrors of the past. And I started to think, holy what if every single bit of science we're seeing from Vegapunk and everyone at M.A.D.S is a parallel, is meant to be a recreation of something that was done in the past? So let's think about this. We would want some evidence. We would want some places where they were doing things that we think had been done in the past. Well, the Mother Flame is one. We know that for a fact. Robots, we know those existed. But what about a group of super people? Well, I started to think the Seraphim were made to be unstoppable people. So were the, whatchamacallums, the Vinsmokes. They were built to be the absolute peak of possibility, to be invincible creations. My theory for a while has been that the reason we don't see any Lunarians on the moon, we just see pictures of Shandians, Birkins, and Skypians, is that those were the races on the moon, and that the ruling class who came down modified themselves into the unstoppable Lunarians. And now the Seraphim are just a better recreation of that. This is something Mama brought up. What else were these guys doing? Well, we have seen Caesar try to make giants. We've seen Vegapunk make dragons and ancient giants. We have seen Caesar, importantly, make animal people, which made us start to think, oh shit, what if the minks were created by the Lunarians? What if they were one of the first attempts to create these super people that were the Lunarians? That's why when minks go sicko mode, they get the white hair and the red eyes. Now,
and then we said, what about the fish people? Where did they come from?
And they have that box of drugs that also makes you get white hair and red eyes and superpowers.
Exactly.
Here's my take on the white hair, red eyes, and superpowers. And you might find this crazy, but I think I'm right here. We've said it before. I think in One Piece, demons and gods are the same thing. It is just a matter of perspective. I think the true nature of a pure, powerful devil that was trapped in a devil fruit to give someone devil fruit powers is white hair, red eyes, smoke clouds. I think all that shit is their manifestation. I think the reason that Jewelry Bonnie can turn into that isn't just because, you know, she believes in it. I think it's because that's true awakening. That is truly unifying with the demonic force within it. I believe that the reason, and I'm gonna be proven wrong real soon if I'm wrong, the reason Loki so strongly believes he can be the sun god is I think his fruit can do the same thing. I don't know if Loki can, because I don't know if he sees himself as free yet, but I think it is possible for him to do that same sort of sicko mode transformation. This is all going crazy, but hear me out about this. We've talked for a while about how Vegapunk was missing something. It looks like the Mother Flame is perfect, but it's missing something. Well, I've said before that I don't think it's as simple as fusion or fission. I think that the flame within the earth was tapping into the energies of hell. That by siphoning it out carefully, by covering it with the cork, that was, oh my God, I just realized something about this is going to tie into your theory with Izanami we talked about last time. I think to get corking hell with the sun tree allowed them to siphon out devil powers, and they experimented first on minks and with the drugs they gave to the fishmen to make their subservient groups, and they have this access to white hair, red eyes because they were given the ability to be infused with devils and demons. I also, Law did the experiment. Well, he was working for Caesar, so I'm going to count it. Oh, wait, but he did make animal people with smiles. He made animal people with smiles because they're not proper devil fruits. Anyways, I think that they put the essence of this demonic energy into themselves. That's why they work as fallen angels, and they are angels who truly came from the sky to live on the red line, the ground, which is why they are styled after demons, but because it's One Piece, they're demons who call themselves gods.
Paladin Berserker mentioned the animals that Gaiman was protecting,
Gaimon?
and I love this. Gaiman is protecting, and I love this because it's also could be seen as an early iteration of trying to make animals with different strengths and fish and etc. and experimenting with giving them personality and human-like qualities, and it would be the quote-unquote failures, and over time they have babies and they continue to be this not animals. It would be a really interesting thing because Oda put it so early in the story that it would be a really interesting thing if that turned out to be evidence of why we shouldn't have done this, all the different ways in which we had these experimented animal offspring.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's so many things to think about in there. And I'm mid on it because I know for sure, I feel it in my bones that the moon is going to be, the moon's artifacts and archaeology underneath are going to become very, very important in the story. I feel that in my bones, that it's underneath, that we haven't seen it, and it's going to end up being very, very important to us. And we just haven't got there yet. I believe, these are the things I believe in my bones. I believe in my bones that the red line needs to get the fuck out of the way, because the drums of liberation are, how do you move the drums of liberation through the world? Well, the number one way to move a sound wave is through water. Water has the greatest way of having a sound wave. And if the drums of liberation coming from your sun god could do anything, the louder drum beats need the arc to be gone so that the entire world is brought to life in a different way, that something big will happen when Luffy's reverberation reverberates out throughout the world. So how do you stop it? You create sections and you don't allow those drum beats to come across the world. By creating a red line that's raised above, you stop the beats from being able to connect. And I think that's going to be very, very important in my bones. But so I started to think, I really do believe it's possible, because Oda loves people to be good and bad. So I really believe that it is possible that the Lunarians were on the earth first. I really like that, with people coming down and stealing the resources of the Mother Flame, and then the Lunarians, in order to protect themselves, go too far, and then they need to fight against Lunarians because they're creating problems, and they create giant weapons that end up hurting everyone. But I also love the idea of the Lunarians being the people who were inside of the moon. I just think that it's weird to say that there would be no historical evidence at all, and the only thing that we would see is evidence of other nations, you know? I know you have a reason for it. I just think...
Well, my thinking of why we don't see much in the way of evidence of the world that came before is that the red line smothered it, that the red line ran along all the major cities. On the moon?
The moon has all of those cave drawings, and yet none of them are Lunarian.
Well, that's because my thinking was that they didn't become the way they are, and that's my evidence to why the Lunarians didn't previously exist, because they're called Lunarians. They clearly come from the moon, and yet the moon has no record of them as they look, which is why I stand by my theory that they were modified into the form we call Lunarians by experimenting with this demonic power once they were on the blue planet. And further evidence to why they are the forest gods who bound devils, I want to tell you something. What's King's name? The one Lunarian we know, what's his name?
I don't remember King's name.
Arbor.
Oh,
The one Lunarian is
don't know
named Arbor.
that is interesting.
Some people, that has been translated as Albert
But
sometimes.
800 years later to be naming, it is true. Dawn to Dusk talked about how we're going to need to have a religious component, everyone's religion, not one religion,
Yeah.
to explain how you continue to keep the story alive that was hidden away, that was locked away from the wars, the 800-year void century, the way that you keep it alive, which we see in with the story of Joy Boy, et cetera, et cetera. So like that does make sense. And it would make sense then that the Lunarians would continue to name their children in a tree-like way.
Because they were once the forest gods who ruled from the sun tree Eve, this thing that siphoned
But then it's interesting to say that they would be forest gods when they're partially made out of flame, like the opposite of what you want. So then you would have to ask yourself, is that the mistake they made? They were the forest gods who were there to protect the forest, and instead they fucked the forest over.
I think the mistake they made was the exact same mistake that the 20 nations have made. The idea that, like, I think the mistake has been made over and over again. The mistake was that they saw humanity rise out of control and kill each other and try to reach the station of gods. And they were like, okay, enough of that, smothered them out, took over the world, and were like, now that we're fully in charge, we can keep things at peace. Oda, guys, the man is at least a socialist. Like, I know if you aren't versed in politics, that sounds like you're reaching, but I promise you the man is...
that is not reaching.
Yeah, but no, like genuinely, people think socialism is a world where the government points a gun at you if you have too many breads and says that's not allowed. Oda is a traditional socialist. If you look up the literature, all of his writing lines up with it. That's how it is. Now, what this means to me is Oda is trying to write a world about anarchist philosophy. I think what is wrong is that everybody has thought that their authoritarian method of capturing the world, holding it and saying, I will stop there from being violence, I will stop there from being war, is the mistake that has corrupted them. The Lunarians did it and the 20 Kingdoms did it, because the 20 Kingdoms rose up and said, I think that's what the second world is. It's them looking at a world now ruled by the forest god who now control dreams, who now control myth. They control the underworld, their source of power. They're in command of it. And because of that, the 20 Kingdoms said, well, we'll rise up. Their authoritarian grasp of the world is harming us. And look at all this war that has come of it. If we're in charge, we can keep everything peaceful. Because think about how the Marines talk and act. The Marines and the world government aren't like, we hate you and we're going to kill you for the sake of it. They're like, we're keeping the world in order. Pirates will keep causing violence. Pirates will keep destroying everything if we don't keep the world in order.
The pirates. Like, they literally want to take the pirates, use the pirates as self-policing people. They want the pirates to police the pirates. So which is exactly what we use the entire population of the planet for. We make each other police each other.
Yeah. And the world government was under the impression that by conquering the world, by ruling over it, they could keep everything peaceful. And instead, they've just created authoritarianism again. Instead, they have just once again created a dictator who needs to be overthrown. So that's my thinking. And what we're going to learn as a lesson here is the reason Luffy is the one to lead the world is because he leads in the anarchist method of leading, which is to lead by example and by care, to care about those around you and to freely choose to help those you have the power to help, to encourage those around him he cares about to build up their own strength, to protect what matters to them, and to encourage people to freely help each other as is needed. That's the world Luffy's supposed to create because he's meant to be the good option. Blackbeard represents the bad option of someone deciding to be the new conqueror, of someone seeing this opportunity to become the next tyrant.
Okay, but on a not, like in a deep but not deep realm,
yes,
I would also like to point out that I also believe that he is not going to put it out there bold as a buttercup about, you know, I'm a socialist person at the very least, and here's what's taking place. And that's one of the other things that he is trying to make sure that he emphasizes is that every single person on this earth, no matter whether they are government or whether they are pirate, sucks and rules. And he's trying to make a point that every single person on this earth can be both good or bad no matter what side they are, which is why he has people like the rats and etc. and Axe Hand and all the other people in it first.
But also Kobe and Garp.
But also Kobe, exactly. And so I think that the larger story because of that is going to have definitely a dance back and forth, even though he is obsessed with colonization. So it's definitely going to be, some of it is going to be colonization, but there's going to be a portion of colonization that's going to show that in the end, both the people who were being colonized overstepped, overreacted, overdid, and the people who colonized, and it went back and forth between good and bad, because he likes his people to be complicated and nobody is pure good, pure bad. So that's why I'm wondering, because there's a few things here that we're seeing. Like, can we just look at the Zunesha for a second?
Yep. That's why, to me, the second world needs to be ruled by the Lunarians. There's a reason they call themselves gods. There's a reason we talk about Joy Boy 800 years ago having been a slave. There is no world where they were the good guys. The Lunarians were the good guys 800 years ago if they were called gods and Joy Boy was a slave. Could he maybe have been enslaved to humanity? Yes, but I don't think that's the type of story that Oda would tell, because it feels too simple if the lesson is bad guys are always the bad guys. The humans are always bad. Like, that feels wrong. That doesn't feel like how Oda would tell
That's
a story.
not going to be the lesson.
He's a humanist. He values humanity and the good in humanity. He just also acknowledges the evil. I think that's how he writes, which is to me why they needed to be in charge. The Lunarians needed to be the kings of the world in the Void Century. And if it's a story about colonialism, I think that's why I like them so much coming from the moon and taking over Hell. Because if Hell, the underworld, is the place of myths and dreams, that which doesn't exist, them owning that, them owning a symbol of human culture and saying you can't be trusted with this is such a colonial symbol.
Well, I've been thinking about the story of Uzunami and Uzunagi, and I've been thinking about how to apply it to here. And it would be really interesting for me because the application is she is the first to die and creates the idea of death. From Shintoism, Izunami and Uzunagi are the beginning kind of parents of the world. They're in love, they're together, they bring down with them, they create all the heavens, they birth all the animals, they make mountains, they're rocking it out. When she is giving birth to a specific creature that brings fire to the earth, and this is why I think that that's a very important thing, you kind of want to wonder whether she gave birth to fire, which is the quote-unquote mother flame on this earth. And that's where the mother flame came from, that kept this system working. That's one of the reasons I was agreeing with Dawn to Dusk, is because of that. It kills her, and when it kills her, she goes underground to hell. Now, I'm wondering if that underground is in the moon or if it's in the center of this earth they lived in. It's kind of a hard one. How he keeps her in is he puts a giant boulder in front of it to keep her down in hell. But because when he goes down to see her, she is a wrecking mess and is rotting. And he's like, oh, dear shit. And he runs away. He puts a giant boulder in it, but when the boulder is removed, a giant monster comes out. So if she was in the depths of hell, which is the moon, and a giant monster comes out, that monster could be the combination of those two planets that came down. This is one thing I was thinking. And then he throws out 3 peaches that will cleanse the earth and keep it protected. And when he does so, I was looking at the different planets and I was wondering, okay, what would those 3 peach pits come into? Would they be the trees that protected it plus the giant tree that the giants lived on? What could be the symbolic piece of the cleansing of the earth in these peaches? Or could it be turning off the fire that she created through giving birth to it? It's on the verge of something. The moon was the place that they put her, right? So if they put her in the moon and that was quote unquote hell and he's playing around and bending the rules, she would have been underground, just like in the original ancient story.
But I think it's more likely that it's below the earth for so many of what we talked about.
Yes, but I'm just saying, then when she came down to get retribution, which is more closely related to Princess Kayagi, who would come down from the moon to Princess Kaguya for her true love. And when she got there, she might find that her true love had corrupted the world that she had helped to make. So there's all sorts of crossovers you could make there. But I just want to say one thing before we do it. The reason that I'm kind of fascinated by those 2 stories is they go with the story of wars, which I honestly think that he is attempting to put in, and I've said it before, the story of our world within this story, because I think that it's the truest purest form of talking about history without talking about history that you're not allowed to talk about. And so Zanesha is my clue. And I think I need to look more at this to figure out, I think it'll help to give a clue, because there was the Indian National Congress in World War II that was led, the INC was led by Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay.
And some people that other people won't know, Sardar Patel, Jawaharlal.
Oh yeah, Sardar. That guy.
People that the rest of you know Mahatma Gandhi. So they opposed the British involvement in World War II that was taking place in India without consent. And India was like a massive player in World War II. Like they committed so many people to this effort. But the British just declared India's participation. They were like, hey, do you want to participate in World War II? They were like, congratulations, British India. You're participating in World War II. Mahatma Gandhi wasn't really impressed with it. I have other things to say about Gandhi. They're not nice.
His beliefs around peaceful protest are pretty based.
So they imprisoned lots of the INC leaders.
Wait, actually, never mind. Go back a second. His beliefs around peaceful protest were because he was in a position of authority. They're not based at all. He believed in peaceful protest because he didn't want infrastructure that he owned to be damaged in the revolution. Fuck that. Riot. You don't need to protest peacefully if you're being oppressed by colonial power, actually.
So then the British people were kind of pissed off because the INC had their nonviolent resistance, blah, blah, blah. But then Subhash Chandra Bose, he was a former Congress leader. He said, screw that. Let's have a more militant approach. And he decided, they stuck him in house arrest and they were like, screw you. But he contacted Japan. He was in house arrest when he contacted Japan. And he said to them, the INA, the Indian National Army, would like to get in line with the Japanese people and come into India and take it back over from British rule. Because remember the first time that India was in World War I with Britain and everyone else and was also forced into that war, they were promised that they were going to be released from British rule. And were they? No, they were not. And so they were pissed as shit. And so this dude contacted Japan and was like, bro, hit us up. So Japan expanded into Southeast Asia. They went in particularly into Burma. And then they got into a back door into India, into areas the Indian army and military were. But what did Japan do when they came in? They killed everyone.
Yeah, no. Wait. Are you telling me? Yeah.
And so the Indian National Army fighting with Japan was seen as one of the most...
I think you need to get to the One Piece part of it, though.
So when you look... No, this is why I'm saying it. When you look at the picture then with Zanesha, so if you can go back out, and you look at the picture of Zanesha and how Zanesha is charging into the tree now, and she is bringing with her the mother flame, and she is bringing with her who I think is the Emu character, and she is trying to attack her own space. It makes me think that Zanesha, the thing that she did 800 years ago, is going to be a similar thing. The area where the tree is an area that Zanesha was trying to protect. And this is the reason why I believe Drawk's idea of the Lunarians coming down in another way a little more, because Zanesha is supposed to be protecting this tree. It's her place. It's where she lived. It's where her people are. And instead, she brings Emu in, and Emu is going to be representative here of the Japanese military to attack something that now the Lunarians are trying to protect. And they were supposed to be on the same side of history, which is why now when she does that, she screws the earth, puts Emu in charge, and that's why she has to live with the shame and the regret and a debt that she has to pay back.
We've seen modified magical shells with the Skypians, right? We've seen modified, and I believe the Lunarians made that, I've said. We've seen modified magical shells with the merfolk. We believe that the fish people were made by the Lunarians, and I've been thinking, okay, why is it that Joy Boy needed to promise to save the fish people? What if they were being kept down there at the base of the sun tree to protect the roots of the sun tree from invasion? Like they were being used as underwater servants by the Lunarians, and that's why Joy Boy was supposed to liberate them. And Joy Boy failed because he was betrayed by Emu and the 20 kings when they defeated the Lunarians, who were the kings of the world before.
I think that that's more than possible, especially when you look at the weird elevator. I counted the number of people on it. The weird elevator had 20 people on it, which is kind of an interesting thing that it's trying to say, because those 20 people are all bringing the mother flame to the Zanesha character who is also using Zanesha as an instrument of destruction. I think in this picture that Zanesha is one of the original weapons, one of the 3 weapons.
I don't know if I'm certain on that. However, I do think Zunesha, based off of the eyes especially, is a what we'd call demon, creature of myth, whatever you want to call it. One of those beings that was
I think she's a weapon.
born of the underworld, born of this world of myth that I believe in fully.
Hear me out on this.
Yeah.
They are showing them bringing the mother flame up, carrying it across Zanesha. They made the front of Zanesha's trunk look almost as if it was a vehicle with a boat with oars off of it. They're bringing it up. They are filling it into another boat that could be seen as the 3rd boat, but in actuality, I think it goes the Noah on the bottom underneath Zanesha, and then we have Zanesha, and then above it we have thing that's like the Max,
the Arc Maxim.
The Arc Maxim. So I think those are supposed to show the 3 weapons all on top of each other. That's why I started to think that she was one of the weapons. And I think that weapon was because that weapon is thinking, feeling, and emotional. I think that weapon made a choice and turned its back on its people in order to help its people. So I think it would be a thing that Oda would love to make mention of without making mention of. Also, I don't think we're paying enough attention to the animals going on the ark 2 by 2, which also kind of speaks to this idea of trying to get all sorts of animals and people onto this boat because they might have thought this world, which is now fire, was being destroyed and they had to abandon it. Because the ark theory is the theory that they had to protect people because the earth was going to flood. But what would it look like if that flood was also fire?
But we know an actual flood came and raised the sea level and everything.
But was all of the flood water or was there more to it?
All right.
Oh my God, wait. What if the world was actually fire and the flood was used to put the fire out and they had to get the animals on so that they could float above the disaster they were trying to quell with all the fire?
But then why was this era still called the Sea Circle? Because the second world is in the age of the Sea Circle. It's not the age of the gods.
Sea Circle. They flood it to protect it.
No, but then the age for 800 years before Emu and his gang took over was still called the age of the Sea Circle.
Yeah. I don't think that goes against it.
Okay.
What argue to me why it does? I think that if it would be called the age of the Sea Circle if you were raising the sea in order to protect from the bad things you had done.
But it wouldn't, because the seas weren't raised until Emu took over. That's something that we know. Like we know that the void centuries when that happened.
Here where we have
however, the vast majority of the age of the Sea Circle did not have the sea levels raised.
Yeah, but what would you name it after? Would you name it after when it was all fire?
My thought is
or
the brand line has to exist. Like, because you're not going to name it for the thing that's going to happen 700 years from now. That's not how you're going to name something.
No. Emu in this moment, I think the second age here that we're seeing in this moment is the earth is on fire. You cover it with water. That's why the earth is still on fire in the 3rd part. You cover it with water.
But I think we're seeing the ends of each era is what it really looks like, because we know we're seeing the end of the 3rd age.
To try and put out all the fire. And then I think Emu and the rest literally created a flooded earth in order to fix it with the red line.
I don't know, man. So one of my main reasons is all of these seem to be showing us the end of their age. We see the city being smothered by the red line. We see Emu going to conquer the tree, and we see Luffy and the gang going to fight Emu. They're each showing us the end of the age. If the sea the second world's description ends with the sea god raging, which is likely the sea levels rising. We also see underneath the sea levels, we've seen fully developed cities. You couldn't have those if the world was a world of fire for hundreds of years while that was happening. I think the first world could have been the world on fire, or full of fire, whatever. There's multiple interpretations that I've seen from different translators, but I don't think the second world was, especially because a wooden boat would also be a bad way to escape it. I think
you've mistaken me. So I see the world 1, the world is on fire.
Yes.
They lay down the red line. In world 2, Emu is trying to find a way to put out said fire. which is how they convince
Mhm.
Zanesha to be a traitor and then flood the world in World 2.
I don't think it would need it to be that. I think it could have just been as simple as offering to save everyone, to free everybody from slavery.
Could have
Like,
been.
hey, we need to
Could have been.
overthrow these guys.
I absolutely agree it could have been, but on the other hand, I also think that it could really have been. You lay down the red line, the world is on fire, you're preparing yourself, you need to find a way to get in there, and then boom! And that's why there's a Noah's Ark. They knew they were about to flood the world. So what do you need? Boats. Giant ass boats where you're putting animals in 2 by 2. You're about to flood the damn world.
Yeah, I agree it was about to be
You
flooded.
need to get everything you can off. And I think it was about to be flooded, and that's why they put down the red line. Well, the sea serpent that becomes the red line. I think they've been burning the world and fighting in the world and causing environmental destruction, and everyone has been all together and able to get to each other. And two things happen. Emu decides the very best way to keep people apart from each other is to create islands rather than continents where people can no longer fight, attack, move amongst themselves at their own free will. And the only people who can are people who have creatures like Zunesha or boats. You flood the earth, you separate the islands, you separate the world into sections, and ta-da!
I think you don't need the world to have been on fire at that point for any of that. And I think the world on fire is a description in the first world.
Fire. I'm talking like metaphoric and real. I'm talking about there being like bombs, but there's also just how do we separate people from hanging out with each other? How do we keep them from being able to move freely and kill each other? The red line does some of it, but you still have great big continents. Like if there was a red line and it wasn't on Canada, we could still go around.
Let's go to that. Why I don't think there was great big continents anymore, because we know Ors was called the continent polar. I was asked earlier if I felt that the Lunarians had anything to do with other slaves, if they had other slaves. I think the ancient giants were made by taking giant people or just creating them from the hell tree, basically growing them out of whatever the hell essence they have, tapping into that and creating the ancient giants, making Ors and the other ancient giants to pull the continents. And I think the reason we have the era of war that happened where the ancient giants fought against humanity as these horrible villains was because they were loyal to the Lunarians. So when the humans took over, eventually they rebelled and revolted against them. But I think the ancient giants were basically built. I'm not too caught up on hell. You're not caught up enough on hell, because here's more evidence I have. Everything I look at feeds into it more. Every place I see someone run into a dead end, I see hell as the answer. It solves everything. It is at the center of everything.
Get on board the hell train.
Yeah. I was against Mama Drawk being caught up on hell, and I'm on it now. Hear me out. I got into this earlier, but it wasn't important at the time. Here's what I mean by it solves problems. I was looking at Dawn and Dusk talk about that something is added by the rhythm of Joy Boy, because all of these things are supposed to be powered by the Mother Flame. That's supposed to be enough to power it. But why can't we get the ancient giant to turn on? Why isn't it reactivating? Well, what if Joy Boy's drum heartbeat being a god, powerful devil, same difference, is that ethereal energy of dreams, that shit that comes from the underworld, that power source that fuels them, that gets the drum beating. And that's why we suddenly had enough to reactivate Emmett. But
I think that's hockey. That shift of dreams, a man's dreams, I think it's hockey.
I think hockey comes from the same vibe of place. I think it's
the same thing. And I think being able to wield hockey, we've already seen in the tying of Emmett's knot in there, is the thing that hockey is the power source that is used. It is the thing that creates a man's dreams. It is the thing that is used to create power change. And I think hockey is going to turn out to be the thing that is turned on at an epic source when the drumbeat of liberation happens.
I think you're misunderstanding. A red herring would be where this narrative is directly pointing to it. The narrative has never pointed us at the underworld being the solution to this, to being the power source, to being what fuels the sun tree. The reason the theory about Jon Snow's parents being who they are was good was because the series never pointed to it, but it answered all the questions perfectly. The reason I'm on board with underworld thinking now is because everywhere it solves problems. It can just plug in and be the perfect solution, but the series has never told us to think that way. That's why I'm on board. And if I'm wrong at the end, I'll be like, hey, I was wrong. But if I'm right, this channel was Hell Piece. This channel was on it.
Oh, I've said day one, it's for sure. There's for sure hell matters. I know there is going to be a hell, and I agree with you that there's a power source there. I just think it's hockey.
But I got more.
Okay, go ahead.
Devil fruits, I think, are literal devils. Why, if they're not literal devils, is it that Vegapunk can only recreate, right? Why is it he can only recreate Zoans? And why does Oda now say in an SBS that artificial Zoans don't reincarnate? What's the difference?
That's right, baby.
What's the difference between those? What's the difference?
Actual spirit.
An actual spirit, an actual creature of myth that is dragons, or is the idea of leopard demon or whatever that goes to the next one. And why can't he recreate Logias? Well, we've talked about the fact that they pull all of this crazy energy. Zoroaster is also solved by hell theory. Yes, if Haki is related, because hell is a world of dreams, Haki being able to manifest as these dreamlike entities work perfectly. Well, Paramecia's needing green blood works even better, because get ready for this. My belief for a long time has been the durability of the Lunarians is because they're channeling this dream energy, because they're part devil. They've been infused with devilish blood, that they can make themselves durable. You die if you have 2 devils in your blood, right? If you eat 2 devil fruits, you die. What happens to Lunarians when they use their devil fruits? When they channel devil energy of another source, the flame goes out. The flame goes out. They're not in active devil mode every time they activate their devil fruit powers, right? Why can't Vegapunk recreate Logias? Well, because of fucking dimension piece, because the dimension is the abyss. It's what the hell circles travel through. We see summoning circles. They're traveling through hell to get around the world. You need a mark to get through to be protected from hell. That's straight out of Warhammer shit right there. And my belief is Logias pull matter from the abyss. Why can't Blackbeard's fruit be connected to it too? You can also summon demons. You can summon demons if you're the one who lives where the stump, literally lives where the stump of the sun tree would be. Because Mama earlier talked about Izanagi being trapped in the underworld after dying and a cork being put on top. What if the cork was the red line? What if that was what blocked it all out, and then they could grow a tree there? Or the tree was what the cork. The point is, a font was covering up.
It's one of the trees that grew when he tried to cleanse the world when he threw out the peaches.
Yes, and that is the sun tree Eve. And Emu, when it says they killed the sun, when it says man killed the sun, it wasn't the sun god they killed, it wasn't Joy Boy, or maybe it was both, but it was rather the sun tree Eve they killed by slicing open, freeing Izanagi, and accessing all these demonic powers.
Yes, because they're used unruly, and the power that the sun tree is a regulator for the power of the mother flame.
I mean, I think it's regrowing. I think they did chop it down, but now it's regrowing because it's not as big as the atom.
No, it is not as big as the atom. Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with all of that, because I'm a person who has been hell peace all along, and it helps to explain the dimensions. It also makes it more terrifying when you think about things like an entire area being sent down through dimension piece, that it ends up being in hell. He'll do hell in an interesting way in the end. We're going to see hell.
It's going to be, Oda does everything in an interesting way. We're not going to be 100% right.
No, it's just, what I mean is hell isn't going to be the hell the way we think about it.
I think it is fire and ice.
Yes, I agree. I've been trying to figure out how. So give me your theory.
Well, I'm not sure exactly, but I think, first of all, your conversation about Punk Hazard. So
yes,
I've said for a while that I think Logias, when they're awakened, become able to permanently warp an environment. I think that's how we got a lot of the weird areas we got. The Lunarians could have been terraforming, doing this on purpose. It could have been a result of their war with the Ancient Kingdoms. We can't really know. So that's my thing. That's my thinking, right? We have seen an analog for hell as well, where we see in Impel Down layers of fire and layers of ice. We have also...
Yes.
We have also seen people use hellish flames, hellish slicing, and Brook calling upon the chill of the underworld.
Yes. Brook, for me, was the other thing where I was like, don't tell me hell doesn't exist, and don't tell me we don't have access to it. He has soul powers. So does Mama have soul powers.
And he physically came back from the underworld. His soul physically returned.
He physically came back and said he came from the underworld. So we know it's a place that exists. And so I think it's a combination of using kind of that Shintoism piece along with this like dimension piece going into hell. Yeah.
But yeah, no, my theories here are just 100% like, demons are the solution. Demons are gods. They're the same thing. Demons is why we have had the weird interactions with green blood. It's why the artificial fruits don't reincarnate, and the ones that were originally made did, because the original ones were channeling actual demons. That's why it talks about the forest god conjuring
And then
demons.
now we have a new issue. Like when we talk about the animals of Zoe having in the past been given something that turned them into like Chopper, but it turned them permanently. Now they have babies and they're still within there, and it reincarnates them and is part of their DNA and is changed. You start looking at all the different things that he's done to all the different islands. You've got the long arm people. You've got people with small weird wings, people with larger white wings. You have people who are animals. You have people who are fish. You have all these different types of people, and you start having to wonder, are these all iterations like the people of Zoe that he's showing us? And that's one of the ways that when they separated the world, many of those islands kept the people that were there and it wasn't bred out. And now we have kind of time capsules of where the messing around with human DNA got to.
I just learned something so cool.
Go ahead.
Poseidon, the Sea Kings, and the Merfolk were created to live in the roots and protect the roots of the Sun Tree. If you go according to Norse mythology, a serpent dwells on the roots of the Sun Tree, right? A snake, let's say the sea serpent, the snake, let's say that's the Merfolk and the Sea Kings, okay? Protecting the roots. The Sea Kings protecting the roots. All right. Let's then say the red line running through it, just as we've always imagined, is Jormungandr, because Jormungandr wraps around the trunk of the world tree. So Jormungandr is around the base. You know what lives in Yggdrasil at the base of the trunk, not the roots, and just above Jormungandr? Animals. What if the minks, having been experimented on and gifted powers to protect themselves? I mean, it's deer, but yeah, it's the deer. It is the beasts, usually represented as deer, but it's also said to be
also
the
have
beasts.
the
Ratatoskr, and the deer.
They have a bunch of different animals with power in there.
Furred animals are what is usually shown to be there. And then at the top is birds. So what if the top living in the tree were the forest gods, Lunarians, on the branches, living at the base were the minks, which is why when Zunesha saw their home slain, saw their home destroyed by Emu, he offered to let them, as in penance, offered to protect the minks and let them live on his back, because they would have been up there. All of the Sea Kings are serpent shaped and they all dwell around the roots. Yeah, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the Sun Tree Eve was an Yggdrasil metaphor as well as Adam is. What are your thoughts on Elbaf's astral level and what's there? We haven't seen enough. Weirdly enough,
I don't know too. That's why I'm not convinced on the whole Lunarian thing and the other people with wings. Because when we're talking about what do we think about that astral level makes the most sense as being them.
True. But there was two big trees. There's plenty of non-serpentine Sea Kings. I don't remember them, but if you're saying so, you might be right. My point, though, I think stands. I think this works, and I like the idea that the minks used to live at the base of the tree. It feels like it makes sense to me.
You know, I've decided now that the Sea Kings are going to be partially responsible for dismantling the red line, that they are waiting to be given the proper cues, because they were like, oh, they're the ones that talk to Luffy. They're the ones who are able to have conversations. Blah, blah, blah. And I think that they are going to be used in their great power to help pull apart the red line and break it.
Perhaps.
The reason I also think this is, think about how Laboon in the beginning was smashing his head against it the entire time. And he kept saying to him, you can't break through, Laboon. It's much bigger than you. But think about all the protected Sea Kings who, quote unquote, we put them in here for their protection, but they're actually used as a form of weapon. So that's bullshit in the comm belt. And it's a nursery. Think about how many there are there, how they can communicate with those with the deep power like Luffy's. I think that they are going to crack the red line and it's going to break apart.
Okay, I have a thought I want to run by you and it's insane.
Yeah.
What if what we are seeing now, what if I'm right? What if you're right? I'm right. Underworld is a world of dreams, myth, and the dead, right? All the mythical beings are down there.
I've been saying that for freaking months. I'm guaranteed.
Well, we're going to go further. There's more. So that's step one. Then on top of that, all of these figures are figures of myth. Emu has taken into himself the great sea devil. He has taken into himself Izanagi, who represents the ocean, who represents the devil, as a lot of theories have suggested, and is now effectively the devil, is a probably depicted as a dragon, but is the devil, rules over the world. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's Izanagi. Yeah.
What if there are devil fruits of these figures of myth as well? Or maybe some of them have been reincarnated as devil fruits? What if the reason Loki's belt in the image has the same pattern on it as the pattern on the snake that is the red line?
And the planet.
The snake and the planet is Jormungandr. It was created to create the red line, and his fruit is the Jormungandr fruit, which is why he, Loki, can begin the apocalypse and just and get rid of the red line, because he has its devil fruit. I know that's insane, but wouldn't that be cool?
I love that.
I'm not as convinced about that as I'm a lot of things, but I think if that happens, that is going to be evidence towards a lot of what we've been saying.
All right, this is where we have to stop.
Oh, we didn't even do plugs. We're just mad ranting today.
Oh, let's plug. Here you go. Hey, everyone.
Hey, yo.
Like and subscribe. That's all. Bye.
All right, guys. We've had fun here. Jesus Christ, there's so much crazy shit.
Today was super fun.
Guys, we're going to keep obsessing over this. Anyone who thinks we're too committed to hell, I think at this point, Mama and I are just so committed that the underworld is going to be relevant. And what I want is for, if it happens, for everyone to be like, oh, holy they were right. And what I will say is, since we've started talking about this, it has leaned nothing but more towards us being right.
Mama, because of your Gandhi tangent, I now believe Lily was the Vegapunk equivalent of Second
Weird.
World. What do you mean?
You made me think in your tangent how many times England has been a horrible, evil colonial power, but they've managed to come away not looking that bad because someone did even worse evil next to them.
It's just wild.
Like, if I had a nickel for every time, I'd have a lot of nickels.
How to be evil long term? Have someone else suck a little bit more.
Yeah, like in Africa, France was worse. In the Americas, Spain was worse. In Asia, Japan was worse. Everywhere they go, there's someone being a little bit worse.
I think Lily was a naive scientist who then came to her senses towards the end and equally felt betrayed by Emu's true intentions.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's good. That makes sense, because if Lily and Emu were together, then it would make a lot of sense. Or, oh, shit on a turkey. No.
She's losing her mind. Don't
Can
worry
you
about
remember that there's a possibility that Lily could have gone to hell and become Izunami?
She could have.
And Emu could have become evil over time and was Izunagi? And I've been Emu is a girl for a long time, but that would make sense, hey?
I think where I'm leaning most now is that Emu might not be a woman as the human Emu, but has been kind of like infused with an Izanagi figure and might be.
I think I love the idea of, but you know what? No. You want to know why no?
Why?
Do you want to know why no?
Why no?
Because Luffy is holding that specific shield, and there's a boat with that specific shield from Alabasta.
Yep.
That's why I know that Izunami is not going to be Lily.
All right.
Yeah.
You guys rule. I hope everybody had a good time. We've been doing our best to
So much fun with you. I missed you squishies while I was sick.
This is driving us actually insane, isn't it?
It really is. That's a fair statement.
We're going to lose our minds from this ship. Until next time.
Squish on, squishies.
It's been lovely talking to you. Bye.